So welcome everybody to our first Career Hacks event of the year. As a reminder, for those of you who have just arrived, Career Hacks is actually a collaborative effort between several departments on campus. So that includes the Foothill Workforce Department, Science Learning Institute, which is where I work, the Emerging Technologies Institute, the Business and Entrepreneurship Club, and the Business and Social Sciences Division. So my name is Sophia Kim. I'm the director of the Science Learning Institute, and I'm hosting today's event. We're really excited to have our first in our What's It Like series. This is where we bring on speakers once a quarter to share about what's it like to be in their career. And today we have a panel. I'm just really excited to introduce you all. So as you see on the screen here, we've got Brandon Johnson, who is a senior solutions architect at NVIDIA, Johanna Kim, who's executive director at the Stanford Center for AI in Medicine and Imaging, and Marissa Ramirez de Chanlatte, who's the co-founder and COO at Prompt AI. So I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen, and I've spotlighted our speakers as well as myself. And how we'll do this is I've got a set of questions, and we'll go with the panel for about 45 minutes or so, and then definitely want to have space for students to ask questions. In the meantime, though, students or any of our attendees, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can see about answering questions along the way if the guests are okay with that. And let's go ahead and get started. So first, if you all could just start off with like the short introduction of yourself, what you do, your name, your pronouns, an elevator pitch of what you do at work as if explaining it to somebody who has no idea about your field and how it's related to the larger world of artificial intelligence. So Marissa, do you mind going first?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Marissa. I grew up in the area. I never know where to say I'm from because I lived in like 16 different apartments before I was 18, but mostly in the Palo Alto, Mountain View, Los Altos area. So I went to Los Altos Public Schools and a Foothill Middle College, and then to Berkeley where I did my degree in mathematics and then a master's in nuclear engineering and finally a PhD co-advised with the high performance computing group at LBL and the Berkeley AI lab, which I think has spun out some of the greatest research that we're seeing right now, including some of the ChatGPT founders, if you've seen Sora or any of that kind of stuff. So some really, really cool stuff. I think it's a really exciting time in AI. I spun out a company with my advisor, who's the director of the Berkeley AI lab, as well as some colleagues called Prompt AI, where we are working on using multimodal AI to create consumer solutions for home cameras. Think of like your Ring doorbell or any camera that you have in your home. We're building AI products on top of that to kind of turn it into a smart visual assistant. But actually, excitingly, I actually started a new job this week. So I'm still co-founder of Prompt, but I'm taking a step back because I guess you can't see, but I am 6 months pregnant. With my second baby. And so I think being a founder is really exciting, but it's also very demanding when you have little ones. So I'm taking a part-time role and I'm now going back into investing full-time. So I work at a venture capital fund called Playground Global, also leading their AI investments. So what that means is kind of finding new companies that are building in AI, robotics, next generation compute, and kind of helping support startups. I mentioned the baby because my first baby I had while I was a student, so I don't know if there's any student parents in the audience, but I know for me when I was going to these types of career panels, having children was such a big part of my career decisions, but I feel like nobody ever really talked about it. So please, if there's any student parents in the audience or anyone who are kind of thinking about those things and want to ask what it's like having kids in grad school or any of those kinds of things, please feel free to ask or connect with me after. I'm always really happy to talk about that. And then do I still have time for a day in the life or should I
Oh,
pass
we're
on?
gonna go through
Yeah,
each
yeah,
question
okay.
as it goes. Yeah,
We'll
thanks
go
so
to the
much.
next one then.
Yeah, awesome. Joanna, why don't you go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So Johanna Kim, I'm the executive director at the Stanford Center for AI in Medicine and Imaging, also known as the Amy Center. And I've been in this role for about 6 years now. And the Amy Center has been at Stanford for about 6 years now. So a large part of my role was really launching the center. And my work really focuses on strategy and operations as well as partnerships. So it's a very lean team. So it really encompasses a lot of what you would see in a research center. And I know Sophia mentioned kind of be very introductory in that. And so research centers at a place like Stanford, really we're there to support and empower. We fund research. We bring resources together for researchers. But we also think about as we support research, what are ways that we can really make sure research, particularly in AI in health and medicine, is done safely and ethically, and we're thinking about equitable health, and what are ways that we can really improve health for everyone everywhere through the technology that is built and supported, developed, and also deployed through our center. So we can't do this alone, and it's very much an interdisciplinary field. So we are working together with the computer scientists and other engineers from the School of Engineering. We're working with clinicians and nurses and hospital administrators from the healthcare side of things. And we're covering everything from children to teenagers and adults and seniors. And so there's a lot that's being done in many different fields, and we bring people together. And of course, the health care ecosystem in general is also very complex. So there are, economists that are involved, there's policymakers that are involved, there's the legal aspects of AI in health and medicine. So there's a lot of different stakeholders, researchers, and thought leaders. And so a center like ours is really bringing together many different people to move the field forward. What are ways that we can come together and improve health and medicine globally? And so that's really what we're doing. And so a role like mine as the executive director is to really be thinking about what are the ways that we should be doing this. And I definitely don't do this alone. We do have a faculty director and a co-director who are both world-renowned experts in this space. And so it's really being that partner to build together the programs and the different things that we're doing to make all of this happen. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. And my background is actually my undergraduate degree is in musicology.
We'll get to that.
Oh, don't get to
we'll
that.
Get to that. Yeah. Because I wanted to have each person get a little bit of a chance, and then we'll keep going around.
Okay,
so,
awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And then Brandon, if you could do your quick intro elevator pitch.
Yes, I'll be brief. Nice to meet everyone here. So I'm currently at NVIDIA. I'm an AI solutions architect. What that means is I work with engineers at other companies to try to explain this complicated technology and help them integrate it.
Yeah, cool. So usually sometimes when I do career panels with people, I start from like way long time ago and how did you get here? But because we're really focused on careers today, we'll start with what you do currently, and then we'll backtrack. So we'll ask a set of questions on your current job or jobs. Some of you, it sounds like, have multiple things going on. So Brandon, why don't we start with you? And if you could describe a typical day in your job, if there's such a thing, what kind of work life do you have? Are you remote? Are you hybrid? I think for students, especially as they're starting to explore careers, that kind of world of like, what does a typical day look like can seem really vague. So Brandon, if you want to start off and share what it looks like for you.
Yeah, I guess for context, most of the time when you hear engineering, you think of, working behind a desk and, doing very technical work. I do the very technical work. However, I don't necessarily work behind a desk. I'm remote. I'm customer facing. So every day I'm in meetings with customers. Either I'm meeting them in person or I'm talking to them behind the screen, as we're talking about now, as we're doing now. So my day-to-day consists of being in meetings, trying to understand what is the core problem that the business is trying to solve. Ultimately, I work with a wide range of customers. NVIDIA, we kind of have two different types of solutions architects. We have people that are generalists, and we have people that are specialists. My specialization is AI inferencing and edge computing. So literally any customer that's trying to do that, which inferencing is really hot right now due to LLMs, there's a chance that I'll work with that customer. So, some customer may be using something like ChatGPT, and they may be looking for alternative ways to either reduce their costs or speed up their inferencing time. My job is to understand what are all those, pieces that come together and show them how they can use NVIDIA's technology to reduce that cost or get better performance. I would explain it, a solutions architect role, a little different from, let's say, like a software engineering role or a machine learning engineer or different types of engineering disciplines. We are more focused on how all the pieces come together. So it's more systems engineering. So for example, like a problem a customer may have, they may say something like, hey, I want to create this device that can answer questions in like a, really quickly. I want the device to be small and portable, something that you can have at home. That sounds really generic, right? So my job is to try to understand, like, what do you mean by that? How quickly of a response do you need? What sort of user experience do you need? And ultimately, we end up coming up with something like an Alexa, right? There's a lot of pieces there. There's cloud, there's latency, what type of chip needs to go into that device? Each time you ask a question, does it go back to the cloud? So my job is to really, listen, understand, and ultimately provide solutions.
I guess that's the architect part of it, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. That's super helpful. Joanna, if you want to go next, what's a typical day? I mean, I'm sure in all these jobs there's no typical day, but what does your day in the life of your work look like?
Yeah. So a lot of flexibility, I would say. And because, we're an AI center, even before the pandemic and a lot of people went remote, there was a lot of flexibility in our team and in terms of remote and hybrid work. And I would say, our two director and co-directors, they're practicing physicians, so they have offices in the healthcare space. And then we also have our office for the AI center as well. And so I think from the very beginning, we were all very flexible. We're all available on our computers and basically working, full days, but it could be on the main Stanford campus. It could be at the Amy office, which is actually located in Stanford Research Park, which is this area that's, 1 to 2 miles away from campus. And it has a lot of different research buildings and a lot of facilities there. So we're located kind of off campus. So I'm constantly going from Stanford Research Park to the main campus to the hospital there. I would say a typical day is a lot of time on my computer, a lot of time, with correspondences, email, drafting documents, and working on reports and other types of communication pieces. And then a lot of meetings for sure. We're always trying to be very careful about which meetings we take on, but we have a lot of meetings with internal stakeholders. We have of course our team meeting, planning, and operations meetings as well. But there's a lot of meetings that we have with partners. That could be research partners, academic partners. It could be various partners from our industry partners. We have an industry affiliate program, so we have a lot of people outside of Stanford that we're collaborating with or that we're partnering with on different things. Just as an example, we recently launched an AWS, Amazon Web Services, cloud credit program for research. So they provided the Amy Center with amount of cloud credits that can be used for researchers that we are identifying through the Amy Center would be be able to benefit from that type of cloud credit. So these types of things, these types of programs, we'll develop that together with our external partners. So lots of meetings and a lot of time on my computer. And then it's really nice just being on campus. I haven't been on the Foothill campus in a while, but it really is really nice to go out, meet with students, meet with faculty, other researchers, and just have a lot of meetings to see what are they working on, what are they interested in, what are ways that we can really support that through the Amy Center. So that's pretty much what my day is like. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Marissa, what about you?
Yeah, so very varied, but I would say that there's kind of 3 big components of my job. One we would call thesis building, the second is diligence, and finally portfolio support. So what each of that means is thesis building, since we're a deep tech fund, which means that we're not investing in like websites or apps or anything like that. We're investing in big technologies. So think of like robots, quantum computers, nuclear reactors, like these kinds of big things, right? So first, what we have to do is kind of think of what is our vision of the future? So I was working a lot in robotics before, and kind of the question was, when do I think we're going to have these robots? What kind of robots do I think we're going to have? What do I think the future is going to look like? When are we going to have robo taxis everywhere? Are we going to have humanoids everywhere? What's it going to be? So first, what I would do is go talk to everybody I possibly could who is an expert in this area. So that means a lot of going to universities, going to conferences, talking to researchers, talking to scientists. You also want to talk to the people who would potentially buy these things. So, there was a while that people are thinking of, okay, we're going to put humanoid robots in Amazon fulfillment centers. And so you want to actually go talk to the people who work in those centers and see if that's actually true. And would you actually buy it if we had it? Because it's kind of 2 questions of one, can the technology actually exist? And two, if the technology existed, would anyone buy it? Would it actually solve the problem that they say it's going to solve? So that's the thesis building. And then I kind of came to my own opinion. So my opinion was that I think it's going to be a while before we fully have these like AI style robots doing everything by themselves. I think what we're actually going to have is kind of humans and robots working together. So you think of like, I don't know, even a dishwasher. I think there's a joke we have, which is, what do you call, what's the difference between like a robot and a machine? And a robot is just a machine that doesn't work, because once you get used to it, like think about your dishwasher, we don't think of it as a robot because it works so well that we actually can use it every day. So a lot of the times when things start working really well, we stop thinking of them as like AI. And so my feeling was that I think for a long time, for the next 10 years, a lot of the robots that we work with are actually going to be machines that we work hand in hand with. So once we had that thesis, then the next part is kind of diligence or finding companies that fit that. So I meet with lots of people who are founding companies, usually really early stages. So sometimes it's, you know, researchers at universities or people who've started companies before, and I kind of go out and try to find those people. So that's a lot of networking. I speak on panels like this and encourage people to come contact me. I get emails on LinkedIn. I go to meetups. I, you know, just try to find those people and talk to them, and find companies that I think are interesting. And then the next part is a diligence process where I go through and then I kind of meet them, understand their technology, and write up a report. And I think this is where some of my technical background comes in, where I write up a report and kind of decide, you know, do I think they can actually do this, right? Because especially with a lot of these technologies, you're talking really early stages, they haven't actually built it yet. So they'll show you their idea. And I kind of use some of my scientific knowledge to be like, okay, I think you actually could build that in 5 years, or no, I think that's crazy. I think that's impossible. And then we make a recommendation. And then if it all goes well, we invest. And then once we've invested in the company, then I also help support them. So then it could be things like helping them hire people, helping them get press, just, you know, talking to them and helping them talk through questions and decisions, and just trying to support them in every way we can so that they can be successful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and students, or I guess I should, because not only students on our call, if y'all have questions along the way, please, you know, feel free to ask. If it feels appropriate, I'll ask it, or we can wait and just collect the questions. Along the lines of that day in the life, if you all could share one or two things you really like or love about your job, and then one or two things that you really don't like or love about your job, just to, again, like make more real to students what the possibilities are. So Johanna, why don't you start this one?
Yeah, I love the brilliant people that I get to work with and the ideas of this optimism, from people, from scientists to students to everyone that I work with, this optimism and hope to be able to change lives, improve healthcare, improve medicine, and this space that I work in. I think I've always felt very lucky to be a part of this space where, you know, some of these solutions take a really long time. I mean, the idea of us really being able to eradicate heart disease or cancer, like a lot of other things out there, and it's it almost seems impossible, yet there's so many people that are really passionate, putting tireless hours into finding solutions and finding ways to help other people. And you know, and even the fact that, you know, some of these solutions we may not see in our lifetime, but at the same time, just really thinking about the future of medicine, the future of health, and what are ways that we can really help society, help people all around the world. I think one of the things, especially about AI, that's really exciting is, you know, there's a lot of places locally as well as afar where they don't have board certified physicians in multiple specialties. But when you think of developing an AI model that can, you know, really help diagnose diseases, find really great treatment pathways, or triage which cases are more urgent than others. And when you think of all of the possibilities and things that AI can really improve, but especially in places where they don't have someone who could do that, it's very exciting. So I think that that's what I love the most about my job. And what I like least, I'm not exactly sure, because I know that sounds like a cop-out answer, but I really do, you know, I really do love the work that I do. And so I'm not exactly entirely sure.
That's great. I mean, it's great to hear that. I think for folks to hear, like you could potentially find a job like that where there's so much inspiring and positive about your job that there are very few things, if anything, that you dislike. And you've been at that job, I think you said 6 years?
6 years,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that's a good amount of time. Great, thanks, Joanna. Brandon, what about you? What are one or two things you like or love, and one or two things you don't like?
Think similar to Joanna, I like working with the people. Not only the people, I'd say we work with very interesting problems. Every day I get to work with some of the smartest people in the world. I think NVIDIA, there's like a statistic that they're, like every AI company in the world works with NVIDIA, which is weird. I think they're one of the few AI companies in the world that almost works with every AI company in the world. So I think that's really awesome. I love the flexibility, like the not just the remote work thing, but as an individual contributor or a manager or a VP, it's not very bureaucratic, meaning that you can be an intern and you can be in a meeting with Jensen, our CEO. I would say that's not normal of fairly large companies. So just that flat org structure to be able to contribute day one, I think is really, really promising. Um, I would say things that I dislike about my job. Um, I would say I feel like sometimes the projects are like longer, some of them, like some of the projects are really long. So like I want sometimes that instant gratification to know that like this thing works. But there some of those things are out of my control. For example, like I do work with a lot of healthcare companies, right? And so like one of them, like we just finally won, but we've been working with the customer almost 2 years because healthcare industry is very highly regulated. But then there's like the fun ones, like earlier this, no, last week we had SETI, it's at Berkeley, their institute. Like I've been working with these guys for like 6 months, and like they're able to like find extraterrestrial life based on this device, which is like super random, but like those things are fun. So I would say overall, just the time it takes for some of these projects to come to fruition, because you're working with people almost like in venture, you're working with people who are doing things like very, very early stage. And some of these people are doing things that have not been done before. So it may be, a year or two out before this product gets to market. So that sometimes can be a little antsy.
Thanks, Brandon. And Marisa, what about you?
Yeah, I think similar to everyone else, definitely the people. This is kind of in contrast. I was working as a researcher and software engineer programmer for most of my career. And I think the thing I liked least about that was it felt lonely sometimes. I spent a lot of time just sitting by myself at a desk and coding. And I think what I really like about this job is I still get to think about all the ideas and all the things that I learned. I feel like I still really am using my education, but I'm not just coding anymore. It's a lot of like having discussions with people and talking through the science, which for me, I like talking, so I think it's good. The hard thing, I wouldn't say I dislike it, but it definitely is a hard transition between being in school and working is the job's not very structured, right? I feel like at school as a student, it's kind of like, okay, somebody's giving you a problem. I just need to work hard and solve that problem and then I'll do well. I think in my job, it's not just solving the problem or doing the work that somebody asked me to do. I need to figure out what work should be done. And I'll get judged based on that. So if I could be working really hard, but if I'm spending time on something that doesn't actually really come to fruition or is not the right investment or, whatever, that could reflect poorly on me. So I on the one hand, I really like having that freedom of kind of getting to do whatever I want. But on the other hand, it's a lot more responsibility. You can't kind of hide behind like, oh, I was just doing what my boss told me to do. Like I have to take responsibility for setting my own direction.
Great, thank you. So let's take a little bit of a step back and kind of look at what shaped who you are and how you got onto your path that y'all are on. So if you could each share a little bit about your early background, and maybe that's um, back to childhood or back to when you were in school, and what were some of those early influences, and if there were any aspects of your identity that were significant to share. So I know, like at community college, at Foothill in particular, a third of our students, for example, are first generation. A good number of our students are also from low income backgrounds, even though we're housed in Los Altos Hills. So any of those kinds of aspects of identities that might have some impact on how you got to where you are, as well as any of those early influences. So Marissa, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned a little bit about growing up in the Bay Area, and I think it's definitely a really big influence on my life. Interestingly, I wanted to stay really far away from startups because of that. So I grew up with a single mom, and she actually did work in tech. But I think, as a lot of people know, the Bay Area is really expensive. And so even with a tech salary, she was first in her family to go to college. She was still paying off loans. So it was still hard. And I was also growing up during the dot-com bust. So I got to see the really, exciting times, which I think is kind of what we're in now with AI, of, all these great, amazing startups. But then I was also there, when they all fell apart and my mom lost her job and she was working as a substitute teacher. We were living off of unemployment for a while. And so for me, I actually just wanted something stable. And I thought maybe I don't want startups at all. And I kind of wanted to get out of Silicon Valley. So that's why I studied pure math, is I just thought, okay, maybe I'll get a PhD, I'll be a professor, I'll do, get tenure and be very stable. And I think that's always been a really big motivator for me, is what can I do that can provide stability for myself and provide a good income. And I think I was always taught to just, like, you can rely on your education. You maybe can't rely on a lot else, but nobody can take those degrees away from you. So that was kind of my mindset for a while. And I think it's not until recently that I kind of became a little bit open to being at startups. But I think that what kind of opened my mind a little bit on it is also realizing that, I think the job market, it ebbs and flows. Everybody there, you're seeing a lot of layoffs and stuff. And unfortunately, I don't know, even in academia, that there's a such thing as just like a stable job that's going to take care of you forever. But I do think it's true that I can rely on myself and I can rely on my education. And so that kind of getting those degrees and building up that experience for myself helped me feel a little bit more comfortable taking some risks and feeling like, okay, if any of these risks don't work out, I still have my experience, I still have my education, I still think I have a lot to contribute, and I think I could find another job. Um, so I think kind of what my mindset was, I spent my 20s kind of just really focusing on stability, focusing on building up that credibility, getting really good credentials. And I feel like now is kind of the time where I can take a little bit more risk in my life. And so it's new for me, but I'm enjoying it.
That's super interesting because you're just about to have your second kid. So how
Yes.
does that figure into that?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, my husband, he has a very stable job and he also has a PhD in AI. And so that was kind of the thing, is I felt like by having a solid partner, you can kind of do that. We take turns being the ones to take risks. And there was time where he wanted some extra time to finish up his PhD, and I took on more extra jobs and helped with that. And now it's kind of my time. And I think, it's definitely the benefit that I have that my mother didn't have, of, like, having a partner. So I will say that I think that for everybody, but I think particularly for women, who you choose as a partner ends up having a really, really big impact on your economic ability and what you're able to do. So don't take that lightly.
Great, thank you. Joanna, what about you? Kind of the earlier influences and how maybe some aspects of your identities influence that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And real quick, right before that is Marissa. My husband also is a PhD. He's a professor at UC Santa Cruz. So I completely resonate with everything you just shared right now. But yeah, early influences. So I grew up near Seattle, Washington, and I was always interested in health. I just didn't know what I would do in health. And to be honest, I felt like for most of my high school years and even my college years, I wasn't exactly sure what I'd be doing and what I really wanted to do. And I just had this picture of something in health. And I did need to work when I was in high school. So I worked at an eye doctor's office starting from when I was 15 or so. So just being in that healthcare setting is something that I really enjoyed. I was able to see firsthand doctors helping patients. And there was something about that I really loved. And then, I went off to college. I moved down to California. I went to UCLA. And for a lot of that period, I kept thinking I'm pre-health, but I just don't know what in health. And I'm also, my parents were immigrants, so I'm second generation. And they didn't, they both came for grad school, but they both didn't have a lot of career experience here in the US. So I felt like I didn't have a lot of career advice from my parents. And so just trying to figure that all out. And I remember one day at UCLA when one of my counselors said, what do you love? Like, don't think about, what major you need to do because of a certain career, but just think of what you love and what you would love to study. And I remember just thinking the thing that I actually really love is music. And I had always loved music. I played piano since I was like 3, and I just grew up with my parents saying, like, piano is a hobby. It's something that you could take lessons for. It's never something you should ever think about as a career. And that was so ingrained in me that I had never even thought about studying music. And so I remember this counselor telling me, like, just study what you love, let that be your major. And you can always do many careers in health. Just make sure you do all your prereqs at the same time. And at that point, I had already done all the prereqs to go, to apply to nursing school or medical school, public health school, et cetera. And so I remember this is actually in my junior year that I switched majors to musicology, which is the study of music. And I actually just loved studying music. And as someone who had studied music just through private lessons my entire life, the chance to study something more deeply at a university was, it was just so exciting. So I graduated with a degree in musicology, but I was also just really ready to be public health, pre-med, whatever that may be. So I graduated, and by the way, like, my parents were so worried when I told them I was going to switch to musicology major. They're like, please promise us you're going to go to grad school, or please promise us you're going to stay in health. And that was honestly what I wanted to do, is to stay in health. But anyways, I graduated, and then the first thing I did was I started to work at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, which is actually the largest academic medical center in the Western US that is not run by a university. And I thought it'd be a very short period of time working at Cedars, and I thought I'd go straight to grad school. But I went and I found this physician who was running a very large research program, and we were new grads, but he just took us in. We were writing abstracts and papers. We were looking at scientific data together. And there were a number of people on that team who had their master's in public health from UCLA, which is just down the road from Cedars. So I was really interested in that. And so I went to UCLA and I got my master's in public health while I was still working at Cedars. And I thought it'd be a very short period of time there, but it ended up being 16 years. And during that 16 years, I really went from being a research assistant to being a coordinator to managing projects in the team, and then becoming a manager. And then about 8 years into my time at Cedars, they launched this very large research institute, and they asked me to be the staff lead of that and to be the operations manager of that. So, I guess that's a bit of my journey. Majors, that counselor was right. You don't have to major in a particular thing if you're interested in other careers, but really learning to discover, what you're genuinely interested in, what your natural gifts and talents are, and really using college as a time to be able to dive deep into those things. I think that, I definitely don't have regrets when it comes to majoring in music, but also, thinking about prereqs, thinking about, what are classes and things that I can do at the same time to really keep options open for me in the future. And that's what I did. And I'm actually still am very involved musically in a number of things, at the same time being involved in health and AI as well. So, yeah.
That's super interesting. And I think it's really good especially for the students in the audience to hear, like, if you are interested in a career in AI, it doesn't mean you need to go study AI and that's what you do, right? So just hearing these different avenues. And Marissa, I want to come back to you in a bit after we hear from Brandon about your academic path too, just because I think it's good to hear. You don't have to study computer science. You don't have to study in that field if that's not necessarily like the favorite thing that you like to study. So thanks, Johanna. Brandon, what about you? Early influences, kind of what shaped you to get to where you are today?
Yeah, it's quite a bit. So my background, I grew up in North Carolina, small town about 45 minutes east of Raleigh. So this town is about 50,000 people. I am a first-gen college student. No one in my family had gone to college, and I didn't meet my dad outside of a prison cell until I was 24. I'm 32. So I didn't have really a lot of guidance on what to do going to college. However, my mom was a stickler for grades. So, I was an A student. And similar to one of the other panelists, my mom told me that, I like sports. So she told me that, my education on my brain would take me further than my legs. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to just focus on things academically. I knew at the age of 11 that I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, and I found that out because my grandfather used to take me to air shows all the time. Now, telling a parent, especially a first gen, that you want to go be an aerospace engineer, she's like, "What the heck is that? And how do you even know what that is?" But I was very passionate about aerospace very young, just because of the exposure and those experiences with my grandfather going to air shows every year. And so I decided that I wanted to go to college, figured out what FAFSA was, figured out how to apply to college, get scholarships, etc. So I originally went to college at a school called Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach. I wanted to go there because they had the largest aerospace program. So I went there, and during my time there, my grandfather, who had cancer, got really sick. So I ended up transferring schools to the closest school with aerospace in my in the state of North Carolina, which was North Carolina State. So I ultimately ended up graduating from there instead. There were some pivotal things that happened, I would say, during both my college career and actually high school. My senior year of high school, I did an apprenticeship program in which I was an engineer at a company called Cummins. They make diesel engines. So I got exposure to engineering, I would say, much earlier than a lot of folks, especially like freshmen. Usually when you go to the career fairs as a freshman, it's hard to get a job because they tell you about all this experience you need, and you're literally there to get experience. But I didn't really have to run into that because I actually had some practical experience because I did this program for 1 year. Fast forward, I knew I wanted to do aerospace. However, I found myself enjoying research. So as a research assistant every year in college, and I decided that I was going to go pursue a PhD. I this is probably the most pivotal thing. During one of those internships, it was a program at the High Performance Materials Institute, which is at Florida State. Most of the research I was focused on was like high strength, low weight composite materials, basically things that rockets and airplanes are made out of. Doing this program, the focus was to retain entrepreneurs through undergraduate research. And so we were focused on actually commercializing research. I had never seen that side. And then I finally understood what universities were really about, commercializing IP, why that's so important, why schools like Stanford are ranked really highly. But that program kind of changed my view on what I wanted to do. Because at the end of that program, we had to pitch our research to investors. And at the time, I did not know what an investor was, but I placed in the competition. And so for me, it was a positive. I'm like, wait, I'm here with these Ivy League school kids. I placed in this competition, and I didn't grow up in a background similar to many other folks here. And so I went back to school that the next semester. I was a double major. I was sustainable materials and aerospace engineering. I went back to school that semester and I told my advisor that I think I wanted to switch careers. And he's like, wait, why? I said, well, I really like talking to people about technical stuff and dumbing it down. And he's like, but I thought you wanted to like do your PhD. At this time, I had already gotten into a couple schools. I had a couple assistantships. Um, I decided that I wanted to, I knew I was going to transition, and I knew I wanted to transition into tech because I found like this, basically the type of role that I'm in now. And he said, well, what do you want to do? Are you going to switch to computer science? I was like, heck no, I've been here already 5 years. I'm not, and I don't even like coding. I had only taken 2 coding classes and I thought they were really boring. Sorry, no offense to my computer scientists. I just thought it was boring. So he said, I tell you what, well, if you want, I can just give you credit for your aerospace classes on this degree since you have less courses left to finish this degree, and you can graduate this semester. And so I like walked unexpectedly that semester after having this conversation. And then I knew that I was going to go into tech. However, I didn't think I could compete with people coming straight out of undergrad because I didn't have a background in it, and I'd only taken 2 CS classes. And at the time, I thought you kind of need to be a programmer. So I ended up going to a startup. That's where I started my career. It was at my school's tech incubator. So I got exposure to a lot of startups really early, angel investing, and that's kind of why I still actively do those things now. Um, that I chose to work in the drone industry because I had domain knowledge, going back to what my mom said, your education could take you far. Although I did not finish my aerospace degree, I knew, a lot about aerospace. So I went to a company in which I could still contribute. And that's when I got exposed to AI, computer vision, et cetera. And we didn't really have the resources on our team to hire folks for that. So I taught myself to code. I went on to teach myself cloud and all these other things. And then I applied to big tech. And then I joined a company called NetApp. And I was like, oh, this is super easy. They pay you a lot more. It's less stressful. Big tech is easy. And while at NetApp, one of my customers was NVIDIA. So I got tired of flying back and forth from North Carolina to work with engineers at NVIDIA. Eventually I joined. And so I've been there a little over 4 years in the same type of role, but I don't have a background in CS. I taught myself the code. I taught myself a lot of things from YouTube, Udemy, Coursera. And I actually, I went through the same interviews that everyone else did. So if you are curious about something, I would say pursue it. I was one of those people. Physics is my favorite subject, so I will also admit that it is easier for me to pick up, multidisciplinary topics. So I think AI is very multidisciplinary, so that's why I enjoyed it. But that's kind of how I got to where I am. I would say my passion is probably more startups, just because I started my career in it. And at some point, I'll be looking to launch my own fund, specifically for deep tech.
That's so cool. I've known Brandon now for 4 or 5 years, and I didn't know that. Like I've known pieces of this story, but that just it's so cool to hear how you almost serendipitously ended up in these things. And so, Marissa, do you want to share a little bit about your academic path? Because I know you mentioned you
Yeah.
studied math, but I've also heard your story a little bit just to hear how that
Yeah,
worked.
I've accumulated quite a few degrees. Because I mean, it's so cool to hear from Brandon and Joanna about their passion. But I was one of those people that I just don't think I didn't know what I wanted to do. College was kind of a challenging time for me. And I do feel like I was part of the McNair Scholars Program, which is for first generation low income and underrepresented students. And I do feel like sometimes some of these programs, some of the narratives that we get is it's like, well, you really need to go to college to secure your future. And so I think I was very focused on that. And I don't know that I gave myself a lot of room to have passions. Because I think some of the things I was passionate about was more on like nonprofit side. Did a lot of volunteer work. I really loved like public radio and wanted to do an internship there, but then found out those were unpaid, and so it wasn't really an option for me. And so I think because I was very focused on just kind of getting the degrees and the economic stability, I didn't have like a particular technical passion. So I kind of just took whatever opportunities were given to me, which I don't know if that's like the most inspiring or the best thing that I would advise anyone to do, but I do think sometimes it's just the reality of the situations we're in. And so for me, I went to Berkeley, I ended up studying math. I didn't take any physics or computer science in my undergrad at all. I think I took one math class that did require us to code in MATLAB, but they didn't actually teach us how to code in MATLAB, so I had to learn it myself. But I came out of that not knowing how to code. But the funny thing is I do feel like there's kind of a perception and a hierarchy, I guess, sometimes in the physical sciences. And when you have a math degree, especially from a place like Berkeley, people assume, okay, you must be really smart and you must be able to do anything. So I got a job working on the fastest supercomputer in the world, not knowing how to code. And I was also supposed to be modeling nuclear reactors, and I'd never taken a physics class. And people, I think, were willing to give me the benefit of the doubt and let me do this. So I learned on the job. So I taught myself how to code, and I taught myself how to code on the fastest supercomputer in the world, which was really cool. And people were willing to help me. And then I taught myself nuclear physics, and that was also very hard. And then I got accepted into the nuclear engineering PhD program, having never taken a physics class in my life. And so I learned nuclear physics in about a semester, which was also really challenging. But I think I passed my prelim, was able to do that just by asking a lot of questions, just being very humble. I think a big thing I had to kind of unlearn is like not to act like I knew everything, just be very honest and always ask questions and just say, no, I don't know, because no one's going to teach you. If they think you already know it, they won't teach you. So I had to do that. But quickly, I kind of realized I like the math and comp stuff. I think I went a little too far into the physics and was getting uncomfortable. They had me in like the basement with a Geiger counter working with uranium. And I was like, what am I doing? I like the computers. I like the math. So then I, kept doing that, and I transferred into an interdisciplinary program where I found advisors from the computer science department. So I did eventually in grad school have to take actual classes in computer science. But it's funny that I never took undergraduate classes. So the kind of intro to coding, any of those kinds of things, I never took. That was all self-taught. And then I came in at the graduate level and took that. So I do think I was able to get away with that by having a math degree. I will say mathematics and physics, like kind of your core disciplines, are very respected. And so kind of the advice that I was given, and I think it ended up being true, is that if you don't know what you want to do, like you vaguely are interested in STEM, but you're not really sure what you want, if you get really good at math or physics, people will let you kind of do a lot of different things. And maybe they shouldn't, because I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. But I think at least I was given the benefit of the doubt. Whereas sometimes if you get a specialized degree too early, it can be harder to switch. So if you become an AI person in your undergrad and you take all, I always think it's really good to master the fundamentals, and then you will be given a lot of leeway to understand and learn new things. And I will say, even at Berkeley, in the AI lab, AI is such a huge, massive term that can mean so many things. I don't think there's a single one of us who understands all of AI, right? So we have our own little specialties. I do 3D computer vision. I understand that well. I have the ability to learn all of that stuff, which is what I think having a PhD means, is you're kind of certified that you have the ability to learn a lot of things. But I think, even just probably what Brandon and Johanna do, they must know much more than I do. Like, I don't know that much about AI and health. I don't know as much about inference on LLMs. And so I think that, sometimes I know for me, I assumed that when somebody had a PhD in something like computer science or AI, they just must have known everything about all of computer science and all of AI. That's not true at all. You just learn your thing, and you figure it out. And what you do is you just get really good at learning new things.
Yeah, awesome. I'm just so appreciating everything y'all are sharing, because I think each of you has such an interesting aspect of all of your experiences. So let's open up for audience questions, and we've already got one. And please, for folks in the audience, feel free to either come off mute or just put your questions in the chat. And then I've got some backup questions too, if there aren't a lot of questions. But this question says, looking ahead the next few years, what types of roles and skills will be in demand in AI? So anybody want to talk on that one? And we can have a couple different responses. Yeah, Johanna, you look like you're nodding.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is, so the director of our center, Dr. Kurt Langlotz, he's been quoted so many times by saying this back in 2017, where it was, and he's a radiologist. So he said that AI won't replace radiologists, but the radiologists who use AI will replace radiologists who don't. And so that quote has been taken and spun out into like doctors who use AI will replace doctors who don't. So I think that, in terms of the next few years with AI, I think that AI is transforming so many different parts of our society that I think it is important, especially in healthcare, but others, other sectors as well, to start learning, what is this technology? What does machine learning mean? How is that different from deep learning? Or just, what is an LLM, large language model? And I think that just kind of getting more familiar with it. Even the past year, there's been such a drastic change in the kind of general discussion of AI. I think one person was saying, so Dr. Fei Li, she is an AI luminary, a professor of computer science at Stanford, and she directs the Human-Centered AI Institute at Stanford. But I think that one thing she said recently was, a few years ago, it was like universities and big tech talking about AI. She's like, last week, my grandma was talking about AI, so it's very, it's changed quite a bit. But I think that just learning about these types of concepts, and there's so many places to learn. And so that's what I love. I'm just amazed at Brandon, because even a few years ago, like just, picking up coding or learning other things, nowadays there's so many resources. There's free classes on Coursera. There's a lot of content on YouTube. We do a lot of things through our center, and so if you're interested, there's a lot of ways to learn, even if you're not, even if it's not your major, even if you don't have a degree, you're not in a program that you've paid for, but even just finding ways to learn, there's so many ways to learn about AI. So I would definitely say, like, in the next few years, the types of roles and skills will be, types of jobs, like regular jobs, but they can be very much enhanced by AI. So I think that learning about AI and how it applies to so many different fields would be an advantage for students.
Yeah, and I'll just add on, I feel like from what I'm hearing from the three of you, and I would imagine this is probably a common theme, is like, find what you really like to study, find what you really like to learn, because then you will build those skills of learning, and then those skills can be transferred to learning on the job, which I think is what I often hear, is that you often learn these things on the job. You don't need to be the expert from the get-go. But Marissa or Brandon, anything you want to add in terms of what you see in the future?
Sure, I can share. So a lot of my job is what I was doing as COO was overseeing hiring and HR and a lot of that. And a lot of what I do now in portfolio support is helping companies hire. So I can talk a little bit about what we're looking for. I think Joanna's totally right. And I think that there's kind of two ways when people ask me this question about AI, it's different than because it's gotten in the public vernacular in a way that it wasn't. That I answer that question very differently than I would have 5, 10 years ago. Because before I would have assumed that you wanted a PhD in AI and you meant being an AI researcher. But now I think it's so much more broad. So I think there's two kind of sets of people. I think there are people who are going to use AI in their job, and they might not necessarily be software programmers. They might be radiologists, or you might be all kinds of different jobs. And I think the best way to prepare for that, I think a lot of people are like freaking out, being like, do I need to take a class in AI? No, you really don't. I also think that the younger generations that are coming up now are going to have a huge advantage. I think this was the same thing with the internet and with software, right? Older generations who'd been doing their job without these tools for a long time had a little bit of a harder time and had to kind of maybe take a class to learn how to use Microsoft Word or Excel or whatever. But a lot of younger people who are already using these tools in school, like I think we were talking about how many different AI note-taking assistants popped up on this Zoom. I don't even know how to use those, but students who are naturally using them and embracing these new technologies, they know so much better than me. So you're already doing great. So like trying out new tools, figuring out what you like, getting comfortable with them, being able to use them, that's a huge advantage that I think those of us who have been working in a pre-AI era, like for us, we feel like maybe we need to take a class or we need to read. I think a lot of you guys just naturally are picking that stuff up really, really quick. So I think already you guys are kind of AI native and are learning this stuff really quick, which is really, really awesome. I think the only thing I would also suggest is just getting a little bit more literacy around it if you're kind of in that category. So like when I think at our company, we're an AI company, but we hire for a lot of non-technical roles. And what we're looking for in terms of AI knowledge there is not anything particularly technical, but kind of a general understanding and what I call like AI literacy of like what AI can do and what AI can't do, right? I think sometimes people have a misperception. They see ChatGPT and they're like, oh, it's so smart. It can do everything. Everything that comes out of it is right. Getting a sense of like, oh, these are the things that it struggles with. Like, I think you've probably maybe seen some of these memes go around of like how many R's are in strawberry or like some logic problems and getting a good sense of like, okay, this is the type of stuff that it's not good at. This is the type it is good at and being able to talk about it. I think that was really the level of AI knowledge that we needed for our non-technical roles. And then I think it's a totally different category if you're the type of person who wants to build the future of AI. That I think is a different type of job and a different type of skill set. And from there, I actually even then would say that I wouldn't focus it so much on AI. I think it's like you're interested in building the technology of the future. When I started, I didn't know ChatGPT was going to exist the way it did. I was interested in building algorithms of the future. And so I studied math, I studied the fundamentals, and then it turned out the generative AI, was what I was doing. And so then we ended up doing it before anyone else was doing it and really going forward. So who knows, like, I don't think it's going to still be ChatGPT running on a GPU exactly as it is now. That's going to be the big thing in 10 years. And I think if you are interested in building technology, I wouldn't over focus on what exists right now. I would prepare yourself to build whatever is going to be in the future. So I would focus on having really good fundamentals, really being able to ask questions, understand things, get good in math or physics or computer science or whatever it is that is, and getting basic skills and teaching yourself how to learn, reading. Because I believe that maybe we'll have quantum computers that will do something totally different. Maybe we will have all kinds of different technologies. So I think about AI careers in kind of those two different ways, figure out which one you want to be on. And then it's kind of a slightly different answer for how you want to prepare yourself.
Yeah, great. That's helpful. Brandon, anything else you'd add?
Yeah, I would say you hit the nail on the head with the fundamentals. I find that a lot of people don't understand the fundamentals and yet they want to build things, whether that's companies or work at large, companies themselves. I think it's really important to take a step back and follow first principles, right? Like we're all, in the STEM field, and I don't feel like a lot of things that are being created today I think they're prototypes, they're neat, but I don't think they're sustainable. You kind of see this in the investment space. A lot of companies are getting, funded, but they're like GPT wrappers and all these other things. But I would say focus on like the fundamentals. Also career-wise, I'm one of those people that think that you should, try to find your purpose. So to do that, I think you need to focus on what are the things that you're passionate about. Like it was mentioned earlier, there's several disciplines of AI. There's probably 50 different domains of AI. And no one person is experts at all of them. But I would say figure out what you're passionate about and then also figure out what you're good at. The more exposure you get, the better. I would say there's some like baseline things that you probably want to know, like you want to be decent at math, you want to be decent at, maybe Python programming. But beyond that, I would say on the technology side, being able to, take things off the shelf and like put them together, like hack them together. I think that's really useful. That's not going away anytime soon. And with how quickly this industry is moving, you need those people. So you may not be an expert, programmer. You might not be an expert cloud guru. You might not be an expert database person, but having the ability to kind of, understand how to put these pieces together, I think is super helpful. I think we're seeing like the emergence of like just different roles. If you talk about in hiring, like we had the data scientist, the ML engineer, and now, excuse me, now one of those is like AI engineering. And that sounds like really broad, but these people, like they have a little bit of skills in everything. And these people are usually the first people in the company that's prototyping. They may not be the person that can tell you how to do large scale training of AI models. However, they've interfaced with a model. They can pull a model from Hugging Face and they can get it deployed in their environment. So I would say short term, look at roles like AI engineering, see what the baseline skills there are, which I kind of just mentioned those. I'd say, and long term, I also feel like if you don't have a background in AI, I think that is really, really important because ultimately to solve like difficult problems, you need to be able to take your domain expertise and figure out where AI fits. So I don't think you have to necessarily become an AI expert, but you need to, be passionate about a field or domain. And then you can take what you do learn, that tinkering in AI, to go apply it to, healthcare, apply it to retail or the financial industry, et cetera. And then there are those people who want to go like dive really deeply. I'm biased. I think it's helpful early in your career to not specialize. I think it's great to be a generalist so you can understand how the pieces fit together. From many of the folks that I've seen, especially founders, they have really great ambitions, but they have not, if you're coming directly out of undergrad, you may not have productized something yet. And if you haven't done that, there's a whole other side of it, right? You can have a great technology, but, can you get it to market? Can you sell it? There's a whole host of other factors that play into it, especially if you're selling to enterprises. And I feel that not all, but many folks that I've seen, they're really technical. They've done something that's really novel. They have great IP. However, they've not thought about how, millions of people are going to access it or billions of people are going to access it. And that's because they've only focused on like that domain thing. So it's really fast. However, they haven't thought about, something, a ChatGPT moment where 100 million people will access this thing in 2 months. And we're moving at a pace in which you have to think about those things. But if you're coming out of school, it is unlikely that you built a system to that scale.
This is also helpful, and I think we're going to actually have to close it up. But what I want to remind folks is that if you go to our webpage, the LinkedIn profiles for all our speakers are there, and I would imagine y'all are good for folks to reach out to you if they want to ask you a little bit more about your field specifically or the work that you do. Can I just have everybody help join us in thanking our speakers today? This was super informative, inspiring, and really helpful. Before everybody leaves, though, I'd like to just make sure that is not the page. That y'all know we've got future events. So next Wednesday, we've got a career fair happening from 11 to 1 in the dining hall, and it's actually happening at the same time as a transfer fair. So go to one and then go to the other because they'll both be super useful. A resume clinic is happening the Wednesday after that. And then the following Wednesday, we'll have a topic called Using AI for Career Skills. So as a team, we're all putting on these events for the next few weeks. The web page is what I put in the chat, and then really want to ask that people can fill out the survey that I also put in there, as well as Miloni Gandhi had put into the chat that we have a career coach mentorship program that you can apply for. So if you register for our event today, you're going to get all these links and the recording afterwards. But if you don't see it, go to our website and we can provide more information. But thank you all again, Johanna, Marissa, and Brandon, so much for your time on a Friday afternoon. We really, really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.